it's actually refreshing to see that the ethics commissioner looked into this and said, yeah, slap. You're guilty.
After months of committee investigation and repeated attempts by Trudeau and the Liberals to say nothing to see here, the ethics commissioner dropped a bomb on the billion-dollar green slush fund scandal.
Let's take a look. So we begin with a National Post article. Former chair of Green Slush Fund found to have improperly furthered business interests. Ethics czar rules. Annette Verscheren resigned from the board of directors of Sustainable Development Technology Canada last year after she became the subject of an ethics investigation.
Ottawa. The former chairperson of a scandal-plagued clean tech fund, also referred to by conservatives as the quote-unquote Green Slush Fund, was found to have quote-unquote improperly furthered the interests of companies she was associated with by failing to recuse herself from the board's funding decisions, according to the Ethics Commissioner's latest report. Canadian businesswoman Annette Verscheren resigned as president of the board of directors of Sustainable Development Technology Canada, or SDTC, late last year when it was announced that she was the subject of an ethics investigation. On Wednesday, Ethics Commissioner Conrad von Finkelstein found that Verscheren, quote-unquote, failed to comply with some provisions of the Conflict of Interest Act, but dismissed another complaint that she used her position to try to influence other board members.
Quote, this is the second investigation in a few short months that criticized the waste and corruption at Trudeau's billion-dollar green slush fund, end quote, said conservative ethics critic Michael Barrett, who instigated the reports on Verscheren and Ouimet's dealings. The commissioner's conclusions come after months of committee meetings and external investigations into allegations of misconduct and mismanagement at SDTC. Verscheren co-founded the craft chain Michaels Canada and served as CEO of Home Depot Canada before venturing into the world of green technologies. After she was appointed to SDTC in 2019, she continued to serve on the board of two not-for-profit corporations, the Verscheren Center for Sustainability in Energy and the Environment, which she founded, and the Mars Discovery District. Both entities are business accelerators that give developing companies investments and other supports. She also remained chair, CEO, and majority shareholder of NR Store Inc., a company she founded which builds, owns, and operates energy storage projects. Two types of SDTC funding decisions were at the heart of the Ethics Commissioner's probe relating to Verscheren. The first was one-time contributions of $50,000 to $100,000 to companies that were nominated by or associated with the Verscheren Center, or MARS, and the second was related to the approval of COVID-19 emergency relief funding for NR Store. Now, if you haven't seen our series on the SDTC scandal, I would highly recommend that you do, because it will give a whole lot of context as to what happened, who said what was said in committee, what was done in the timeline. But one thing that we will call back from one of our videos there was that after these whistleblowers, and this is how it came to fruition, blew the whistle on this and said, hey, something really shady is going on here, the company themselves hired an external third-party auditor to come in and do a investigation to determine if there was a conflict of interest. So they obviously learned from the Liberals really, really well. When in doubt, investigate yourself. And then they came back to post this on their website. SDTC has received the fact-finding exercise report commissioned by Innovation Science and Economic Development Canada and completed by Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton, or RCGT, Consulting. We note the report found no clear evidence of wrongdoing or misconduct at SDTC and indicated that no further investigation is merited. The SDTC Board of Directors and leadership team are carefully reviewing the report and are taking action to implement the recommendations as quickly as possible to minimize disruption to Canada's sustainable innovation ecosystem. So after that was posted on their website, the the whistleblowers weren't too happy with that, and they released a recording to the media that actually documents some of their conversations that they had with someone from François Philippe Champagne's staff on how the investigation was going. And initially, the whistleblowers were told, "Oh yeah, this is going to blow up. You know, the whole thing's going to come crashing down." And then all of a sudden, nothing happened. So that happened. Committee got involved, and then all of this stuff started coming out of committee. So shortly after that, Annette Verschuren resigns. Probably a good idea to do that. Shortly after that, the president resigned of the company as well. Probably a good idea to do that.
And today, the Verschuren report came out.
So here is the Verschuren report, 2024.
Executive summary. This report presents the findings of my examination under the Conflict of Interest Act of the conduct of Annette Verschuren while she was chairperson of Sustainable Development Technology Canada, or SDTC. After Ms. Verschuren was appointed to SDTC in June 2019, she continued to serve on the boards of two not-for-profit corporations, the Verschuren Centre for Sustainability in Energy and the Environment, or the Verschuren Centre, which she founded, and the Mars Discovery District, or MARS. Both are business accelerators that give developing companies access to mentorship, investments, and other supports. She also remained chair, CEO, and majority shareholder of Enerstore Inc., a company she founded. Enerstore Inc. builds, owns, and operates energy storage products. It was alleged that Ms. Verschuren was in a conflict of interest when she participated in two types of SDTC funding decisions. The first related to companies that were nominated by or associated with the Verschuren Centre, or MARS. The second related to the approval of COVID-19 emergency funding relief for Enerstore. The examination focused on subsection 6.1, section 9, and section 21 of the Act. Under subsection 6.1, public office holders are not allowed to make a decision or participate in making a decision related to the exercise of an official power, duty, or function if they know or reasonably should know that, in doing so, they would be in a conflict of interest. As set out in Section 4, public office holders are in a conflict of interest when they exercise an official power, duty, or function that provides an opportunity to further their private interests or those of their relatives or friends, or to improperly further another person's private interests. Under Section 9, they are not allowed to use their position as public office holders to seek to influence a decision of another person to further their private interests or those of their relatives or friends, or to improperly further another person's private interests. Under Section 21, public office holders must recuse themselves from any discussion, decision, debate, or vote on any matter on which they would be in a conflict of interest. A recusal is more than simply abstaining from a vote. They must physically remove themselves from the location where the matter is being decided, or be moved to a separate virtual waiting room when the meeting is online, so their mere presence cannot influence the decision of others.
I examined whether Ms. Verschuren, as chairperson of SDTC, contravened the Act by abstaining from board decisions to approve seed funding for projects nominated by the Verschuren Centre, or MARS, and from a board decision to approve a modification to a startup funding project for a company with which the Verschuren Centre had an existing business relationship. Because of her roles as director of MARS, the Verschuren Centre, and SDTC, Ms. Verschuren improperly furthered the interests of the beneficiaries of SDTC funding to companies associated with those accelerators. Ms. Verschuren followed a practice to abstain from the vote instead of recusing herself. a practice that regrettably deviated from SDTC's conflict of interest policy and fell short of the Act's requirements. I therefore found that she contravened subsection 6.1 and section 21 of the Act. I also looked at whether Ms. Verschuren contravened the Act by participating in 2 decisions on COVID-19 emergency relief funding in March 2020 and 2021 to further her interests. I determined that Ms. Verschuren's financial interest in NR Store in relation to those funding decisions was indeed a private interest for the purposes of the Act. She participated in those decisions knowing that NR Store would benefit from the funding. They furthered her private interests, and she should have recused herself. I therefore found that she contravened subsection 6.1 and section 21 of the Act. So this is important. What the ethics commissioner is essentially saying is, although it's kind of problematic that she's still attached to these companies, she would have been okay if during any of the discussions regarding these companies, she completely recused herself, meaning completely leave the meeting, didn't participate, wasn't in the room, wasn't on the video conference, and didn't talk to anybody afterwards about the discussion. She didn't do that. She stayed in the room or stayed in the meeting, but just said, I'm not going to vote. So can you imagine how that went, right?
Well, yeah, if you've got, what was she, the major shareholder sitting there in the room, either virtually or in person, going, well, I'm not going to vote, kind of implying, or perhaps she wasn't, but I mean, if you're in the room as another board member, you're kind of thinking, well, you know, if I vote against this, Annette's going to be pissed off at me.
Well, and remember, she wasn't just a board member, she was the chair. She was the chair of the board for the SDTC. And the other interesting thing is Leah Lawrence, who is the president, who also resigned, ironically a Harper appointee, when Annette was first suggested to be appointed, Leah Lawrence put up her hand, along with her staff, contacted the innovation department. It wasn't Champagne at the time, who was heading it, and said, that's not a good idea. This lady's going to be in quite the conflict of interest because of her other business interests. And they didn't listen.
Yeah, but she's a friend of Trudeau's, is she not?
Absolutely.
So there you go. That's why she was appointed.
She, as you'll see in our other videos, we detail that she was a repeated donor to the Trudeau campaign, to the Liberal Party, paid over $5,000 for a Cash for Access event. All of a sudden became pretty close with Trudeau, went on a business trip with him down to visit Donald Trump when he was in office. And then shortly after that, all of a sudden she's the chair of the SDTC. Shortly after, she creates these startup companies. Now,
well, we can't know for sure, but I mean, that seems fairly suspicious.
Highly suspicious. So it's actually refreshing to see that the ethics commissioner looked into this and said, yeah, slap. You're guilty of an ethics violation. Well, 2 of them, because she did it twice. Now, people are going to say, okay, so what? So, what happens there? So we're not sure, and we're going to be digging into this a little bit more, because this is the first occasion we've come across in the last couple of years where a non-elected official has been found guilty of an ethics violation. So does she have to give the money back? I hope so, but we're going to look into this and ask some more questions and see if we can get you some other answers here. But this is the news that broke. It's a little bit satisfying that someone's at least going to be very publicly embarrassed about this after denying it the whole time, and that would be Annette Verschuren.